listed on the screens throughout and during the meal today. So please join me in recognizing our sponsors, without which this event wouldn't be possible. And speaking about wouldn't be possible without their assistance, I'd like to recognize our board of directors. Those who are with us today, if you wish to stand as you're recognized, our chairman of the board, Kyle Stallings, our chairman emeritus, Dr. Jim Leiniger, chairman emeritus Tim Lyles, Ernest Angelo, Don Bennett, Doug Deason, Rick Fletcher, Wendy Grimes, Vim Head, Stacy Huck, Chaz Neely, and Brenda Pejovich. We also are very much grateful to have several VIPs and legislators at lunch with us today. They include, from the Texas House of Representatives, James Frank, my representative, Carrie Isaac, Brent Money, Terry Leo Wilson, and Caroline Fairley. From the Senate, and you'll hear from him shortly, Mays Middleton, and Kevin Sparks, who used to be a board member at TPPF. And I don't know whether that's a promotion or a demotion to go from board member to the Texas State Senate, but that's the move he made. State Board of Equalization, place 10, Tom Maynard. The 12th Criminal Court of Appeals, Chief Justice James Worthen. And the Texas Criminal Court of Appeals, place 7, Gina Parker. And that's Court of Appeals, Chief Justice James Worthen, if I misspoke. Thank you very much for being here. Also, we had a late arrival, perhaps coming off the floor of voting. Representative Alan Schoolcraft is here. That's a trick that lawmakers learn after they've been in a little bit. You show up a little late and you get special recognition. We're also very grateful to have our uniformed officers with us, helping keep us safe during this entire conference. They're often repeats. You see the same face year after year. We thank them for their service, not only to us, but the entire community for keeping us safe. And I was going to say, please help me thank and recognize them, but you've done it organically, so congratulations, thank you. What a wonderful crowd. At this point, I would like to invite Senator Mays Middleton to join me on stage to give our invocation for today's lunch. Senator Middleton is the president of Middleton Oil Company, an independent oil and gas firm. He runs also ranching, cattle, and farming operations on the property. Prior to serving in the upper body, the upper house of the Texas legislature, he served 2 terms in the Texas House of Representatives, representing Chambers and Galveston counties. During his last term in the Texas House, Mays served as the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus. Now in the Texas Senate, Mays represents Senate District 11, encompassing portions of Brazoria, Galveston, and Harris counties. Throughout his time in both the House and the Senate, Mays has consistently ranked among the most conservative members of the legislature. He currently serves as the vice chairman of the subcommittee on Higher Education and is a member of the Senate Committees on Administration, Business and Commerce, Education, Jurisprudence, and State Affairs, which means he does a lot of running around during session, which helps him keep his trim figure. Mays and his wife, Macy, have 4 children, Connor, Christian, Matthew, and Martha Ann. Mays and Macy support numerous local community organizations and faith-based charities throughout the Galveston, Houston region. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Senator Mays Middleton.
Well, everyone always asks, do you run? I'm like, only after kids, chasing those 4 little ones around. But what a blessing TPPF is. I was on the board years ago, but I think this organization is a testament to Texas grit and persistence because it was founded in 1989 by Dr. Leininger right over here. And I think this is the year we fulfill that founding mission of passing school choice all these years later. So thank you. It was worth the fight, and we're going to get it done. Thank goodness for all the children of this great state. If you'll please bow your heads and join me in prayer. This is the day that the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. Heavenly Father, thank you for blessing our great state with the patriots in this room here today. We celebrate your grace, Lord, that has given us this incredible morning in America. For such a time as this, may we act with boldness of our convictions, where we do not govern of the earth, but bring honor and glory to you. God has shed his grace on thee, Texas, and help us remember, as it says in Micah 6:8, for us to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with you, God. And as we leave here today, please place your hedge of protection around everyone here, around our President, Donald Trump, and around all those that are standing up to fight for us and for our great state and our great nation. In Jesus' name we pray, amen.
So, invite everyone to continue eating. We're going to also continue the program, and at this point, I'd like to introduce to you our education video. We've entitled it The Heist, which is a very intriguing title when connected to education. So, sometimes in the fight for politics, you have to take off the gloves. The amount of money that Texas spends on public education is about $93 billion a year. $93 billion, but less than half of that goes into the classroom. So it's time to talk about what Texans are getting for that money. Schools spend recklessly and go into massive debt, yet deliver worse and worse results. Big salaries for administrations, big paychecks for lobbyists, and the debt service seems to eat up much of our education spending, as well as, of course, our property taxes. That's why we at the Texas Public Policy Foundation took a hard look at Texas education spending and came to some hard conclusions. Please enjoy The Heist, an inside look at education spending in Texas.
There's a heist happening in Texas that is bilking taxpayers of billions of dollars while robbing students of the quality education they deserve. And it's happening every year. Instead of prioritizing what truly helps children learn, rewarding excellent teachers, using quality curriculum, and engaging parents, school district officials funnel billions of dollars to profiteers and allies, recklessly misallocating vast resources meant for public education. And while spending goes up year after year, student performance continues to decline. Here's why. During the school year, Texas schools spend nearly $93 billion, yet only about 40% reaches classrooms for instruction. The rest is either siphoned off into the pockets of administrators, lobbyists, consultants, and contractors, or consumed by the school's staggering debt. This creates a system that prioritizes the needs of an education industry over the needs of students. For example, administrative spending has skyrocketed, far outpacing the growth in number of teachers and student enrollment. Some Texas superintendents are among the highest paid individuals in the state, with 172 of them making $250,000 or more annually, putting them in the top 5% of all earners in the state of Texas. And this doesn't include the tens of thousands of dollars in living stipends for housing, cars, and other perks. For comparison, many superintendents earn more than the governor of Texas, and even the President of the United States. Yet many of the highest paid superintendents oversee some of the worst academic outcomes, with less than half, and in some cases as low as 27%, of their students reading or doing math at grade level. In addition, nearly a dozen school districts spend nearly $2 million employing diversity, equity, and inclusion executives, despite DEI being prohibited in Texas schools. Big salaries aren't the only perks. Top school district officials are wined and dined at conferences and events like Casino Night, hosted by the very same organizations that win their consulting, lobbying, and construction contracts. Conflicts of interest are everywhere, with some individuals working for the contractors while serving on the very school boards that approve their contracts. The profiteers return the favor by funneling millions into a network of advocacy groups that flood Texas with propaganda to keep the heist alive and the money flowing. In total, lobbyists and consultants hauled in nearly $70 million from school districts in 2023 alone. Then there's the debt. School districts borrow tens of billions for questionable projects. McKinney ISD built a $70 million football stadium, while Cypress Fairbanks spent $80 million on theirs. La Jolla ISD has a $20 million water park and a $5 million golf course that loses hundreds of thousands of dollars for the district every year. Carthage ISD once had Texas's largest and most expensive jumbotron, measuring 44 feet wide and costing $750,000. But Brownsville ISD topped it with a $1.5 million 66-foot scoreboard. The two districts have something else in common. The scoreboards aren't well read, as only half the students in the district can read at grade level. The lavish and irresponsible spending doesn't stop there. Roscoe ISD pays a contractor $46 million to operate a virtual school, nearly 10 times its teacher pay and benefits budget. And then there's Granbury ISD, which bought a Cessna Skyhawk. That's right, Texas school districts buy planes and justify it as essential for teaching aviation. However, most flights were later found to be for personal and non-instructional use.
Please make sure your seatbelts are buckled and tray tables are up as school districts take taxpayers for a bumpy ride.
The heist is a massive transfer of billions of dollars from taxpayers into a machine that maintains, grows, and protects a system designed to ensure taxes always go up, the money always comes in, and there's no accountability for how it's spent. This should be simple. Schools must prioritize critical resources on the things that actually improve education outcomes. No one should be getting rich off the backs of Texas students and teachers, especially when results continue to plummet. As long as nothing changes, education costs and your taxes will keep rising without ever benefiting students, teachers, or the future of Texas. It's time to stop the heist and demand better for Texas.
Wow. You know, when you see a presentation like that, I mean, I think of two things. First of all, oh my goodness, really? I mean, that's going on in the state of Texas? I would expect that to be happening in a place like New York or California, but not Texas, and yet there it is. And the other thing I think of is my colleagues produced that. I mean, that's some high-quality communications product right there, don't you think? So, newly confirmed Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Scott Turner, was hoping to join us today, but his schedule would not allow it, couldn't leave D.C., so within the past hour, we received a short message from him that we wanted to show. Please enjoy this message from Secretary Scott Turner.
Hello, my fellow Texans. This is Scott Turner. I'm so sorry I cannot be there with you in person this year for your policy summit. I'm here in D.C. with my new assignment as the Secretary of HUD. Thank you so much for all you do in ensuring the freedoms for all people in Texas and America. God bless you. God bless your families. And I really do look forward to seeing you soon.
How many of you think that Secretary Turner needs to work more on his neck reps? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct honor to introduce my boss, Greg Sindelar, for opening remarks. Greg Sindelar has really done the remarkable. When you think about the Texas Public Policy Foundation and the leaders that we've had, certainly since I've been at the foundation over the last 13 years, we have, of course, the Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins. We have the president of the Heritage Foundation, Kevin Roberts. And we have Greg Sindelar. And what's, to me, fascinating about that is the foundation has continued its upward trajectory in becoming more and more relevant, not only to the state of Texas and helping Texas lead the way, but also leading across the entire nation. And that doesn't happen by accident. That happens by design. That happens through hiring decisions, budget decisions, culture and talent decisions. And across that, Greg Sindelar, I have observed over the last 12 or 13 years, has been a very steady hand, a very deliberative hand. The man knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing in creating and optimizing this machine, this wonderfully effective force for good and for liberty that we call the Texas Public Policy Foundation. So, ladies and gentlemen, please do me the honor of welcoming to the main stage Greg Sindelar.
Man. Well, you know, when Chuck's introducing you, you never quite know where it's going to go. And this far away from annual reviews, I wasn't sure if it would be so kind, but it was. Well, I'm always sad when we get to like the end of Policy Summit. It's you know, I've done 18 of these now. It's just, which seems amazing. I must have started doing these when I was like 10 years old, because I can't possibly be in my 40s. But it's just, it's so inspiring to me. It's so encouraging to us and our staff. And before I get into my closing remarks, because then we'll have our panel here in a second, I wanted to recognize our event team that make all of this happen. So will Clint Neesmith and Annie and Kristen and Erica all please stand up? They're the ones that make all of this happen. And I always get in trouble because I forget someone, but I think I got everyone this year. And can we please thank our wonderful staff here at the AT&T Center? You know, as an Aggie, this is the most enjoyable thing I get to do on the UT campus. And I also want to thank the wonderful Bud Brigham for loaning me a burnt orange jacket to pay off my my debt to the governor. So thank you, Bud. I don't know if we'll make that an annual tradition. You know, if you do things twice and you're an Aggie, things just become tradition. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about our football team. So we'll see. We'll see if we do this again next year. All right. So I wanted to share with you all a few remarks, and we'll get into our panel. You know, this coming Sunday, just 48 hours from now, 189 years ago, the fortress of the Alamo was surrounded. The armies of the tyrant General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna swarmed across the South Texas plain and invested the venerable mission. The garrison within, men from Texas, from America, they were Mexican, Anglo, and foreign, was doomed. And the men knew it. They knew it, and they meant to fight anyway. On day one of the Alamo siege, no one knew the name the Alamo, and no one had any idea what the new Texas nation was made of. On day 13 of the siege, as the murderous tyrant soldiers poured into the fortress to kill the living and the wounded alike, the whole world now knew. The whole world knew what the Alamo meant, and the whole world knew now what Texas meant. And 189 years later, the whole world still knows. It still knows because since the first day, the first fight at Gonzales, and from the first day of the final siege of the Alamo, we've never stopped fighting for this nation that we call Texas. That Alamo garrison knew it was doomed, but it knew something else, that you can be doomed and still win. It knew that to fight is to win. The Mexican army and its cruel master thought it won at the Alamo. It didn't know that it had incepted something unbeatable in its supposed victory. That was defiance, determination, and resolve. And when the final battle came, the men of San Jacinto yelled one thing as they swept the enemy before them: remember the Alamo. And that is my charge as we part ways today. Remember the Alamo, remember it, and when you do, remember that it's not just some slogan, some bumper sticker phrase, or some bit of local color that non-Texans love to hear from us. Remember the Alamo because it is instruction to us on how we live, how we work, and most importantly, how we fight. If doomed men in a doomed fortress could fight to the end for Texas independence, then we have no right to give anything less than our utmost to the Texas freedom for which they died. So when we fight for school choice, remember the Alamo. When we fight Senator Middleton to end taxpayer-funded lobbying, remember the Alamo. And when we fight to secure our border, remember the Alamo. And when we remember the Alamo, you won't go wrong. This is the 2025 Texas Policy Summit, and it's been a good one. I would say a great one. In fact, it's been the best one. But it means something only if we take that fellowship, that learning, and that motivation here, and we actually get to work and accomplish something. Work like Santa Anna's army is on the horizon, and there's Texas to win. So thank you so much for being here. God bless y'all. Thank you very much. All right, so speaking of doing things twice, it becomes tradition if you're an Aggie. Well, yet again, Senator Cruz got stuck in Washington, D.C., and he wanted to join via live Zoom, and I was like, well, sir, last time you lorded over me on a video, and then we had some technical difficulties, and so they are trying to keep up with President Trump and everything that's happening there, and so it's kind of amazing what is happening, but they're confirming people, and they're trying to pass a big, beautiful bill and all these other things. So he is stuck in D.C., but he did want to send along a video message, and so if we'll now please, Clint, play that video message.
Welcome to the Texas Public Policy Foundation's Policy Summit. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you all in person today, but as your senator, I am proud to be speaking to some of the most influential leaders in Texas and in national politics. There's a reason that people come to Texas, because Texas is where the jobs are. Throughout my time in the Senate, my top priority has been simple: jobs, jobs, jobs. Why is that? Because it's the top priority of Texans all across the state. As you know, jobs don't come from bureaucrats sitting behind desks in Washington. They come from entrepreneurs who risk capital to meet a need. 2/3 of all new jobs in the American economy come from small businesses. It isn't rocket science. If you create an environment where small businesses can grow and prosper, jobs will follow. But if you relentlessly attack small businesses, if you overtax them and regulate them into the ground, you'll kill the very opportunities that people rely on to make ends meet. In the Lone Star State, we've done it right, and the results speak for themselves. Over 1,000 people move to Texas every single day. Most of them are fleeing bright blue states with sky-high taxes and suffocating regulations that destroy jobs and crush opportunities for hardworking Americans and their families. As we work to rebuild our economy, we must not forget to invest in the next generation. For over a decade, I've been the leading advocate in the Senate for school choice. I firmly believe that school choice is the civil rights issue of the 21st century, and every single child deserves access to an excellent education, regardless of race or ethnicity or wealth or zip code. All parents deserve the chance and deserve to be empowered with universal school choice. That's why I've authored the most far-reaching federal school choice legislation ever passed, which expanded federal 529 savings accounts to cover K through 12 education for every child in America. Our children are worth fighting for, and I remain committed to leading the fight for educational choice for each and every child in Texas and across the nation. And I gotta say, with TPPF's leadership, I believe the state of Texas, the state legislature, and the governor are poised to pass historic school choice in Texas. Texas should lead the nation, and we have an opportunity right now today to be bold and to transform the future of the state of Texas. In Congress, as the new chairman of the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, I have the privilege of fighting for jobs in Texas every day. The Commerce Committee has jurisdiction over roughly 40% of the U.S. economy, and there are very few places in Washington where you can have a greater impact on Texas jobs. Every day, I'm working hand in hand with President Trump to empower American workers and empower small businesses to advance the full potential of American ingenuity. By pursuing bold technological advances, we will reinforce America's position as the global leader in cutting-edge industries ranging from artificial intelligence to telecommunications to semiconductors to aviation to space exploration. We will cut red tape, slash regulatory burdens, and foster an environment where innovation thrives. Economic vitality goes hand in hand with prosperity, and energy is the foundation of both. Unleashing American energy is not just crucial for the future of Texas, but for the future of the entire country. No place on earth understands energy and does a better job of leading in this critical sector than the great state of Texas. For the last 4 years, the Democrats have waged a war on Texas oil and gas. That war was a driving force behind the crippling inflation we endured under the Biden administration. Now, with President Trump back in office and with a Republican Congress, I am confident that we will rebuild America's energy dominance, and Texas will once again lead the world in producing abundant, low-cost energy to drive inflation down. This November, Americans elected a Republican president, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate. We have a mandate from the voters, and we've got to deliver. Roll up our sleeves and deliver on our promises. Together, we will secure our borders. We will revitalize our economy, and we will restore America's standing as the beacon of strength and freedom for the world. I'm proud to stand alongside President Trump as we work to confirm bold, principled leaders for his cabinet. One of those leaders is Texas's own and TPPF's very own Brooke Rollins. My friend of 20 years, Brooke will be a remarkable Secretary of Agriculture. She will be a tireless and effective advocate for farmers and ranchers in Texas and all across the nation. Thank you, Greg Sindelar, for your steadfast leadership in guiding this critical organization forward. And everyone here today, thank you for your dedication and commitment. Because of you, Texas and America stand stronger than ever. Thank you. May God continue to bless you. May God continue to bless the great state of Texas, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Man, we're lucky to have Senator Cruz, and we're so lucky everything going on in D.C. It's a little bit of a sigh of relief, but what's been so encouraging to me is that everyone realizes it is time to get to work. And so it's incredible. You can barely keep up with what's happening, but you know, it's a battle that they're waging. And so it's just really heartening. But speaking of battles, you know, at our TPF headquarters in Austin, on the 5th floor, our litigation team is all housed, and we call that our war floor, because they are constantly at war with the government and their overreach. And so I wanted to bring up our director of litigation, Chance Weldon, who is the most freedom-loving, liberty-loving lawyer I think I know. I've known him for 10 years now. When we started our litigation center, he was Chance, you were maybe the first person interviewed, but the second person hired, which I don't know what Rob Henneke was thinking, but maybe he's just testing you a little bit. But he did get it right, because Chance has just been one of the greatest public interest litigators in this country. And so Chance is going to come up here and talk about the panel and introduce the panel, because I think you're in for a real treat where, Senator Cruz, one of the most brilliant legal minds in the country, but Chance is bringing up 3 other brilliant legal minds to talk a little bit about how we continue to put government back in its box. And so please help me welcome our wonderful Director of Litigation, Chance Weldon.
Afternoon, y'all. So the name of the panel, of course, is How Public Interest Litigation Saved America. I didn't pick that really grandiose name, but some people are saying it's true. The best people are saying it's true. Many people are saying that public interest litigation saved America. So Alexander Hamilton once said that our Constitution is one of limited and enumerated powers. But these limited and enumerated powers can be protected in no other way than the medium of courts of justice. And that without this, all of the rights and privileges and limitations on government power would amount to nothing. The men on this stage with me here today, they fight those battles in the mediums of courts of justice. And they are some of the most talented litigators I have ever seen. And that says a lot, because I've seen a lot of litigators. And so I'm happy to have them on the stage with me. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what the litigation has been over the last 4 years and what litigation is coming up in the future. Because one of the things that's been over the last 4 years that you may have noticed is that it wasn't the legislature that stopped government overreach. It wasn't the executive branch that stopped government overreach. It was the courts. The courts that were largely put in place with judges that were put in the last administration that had the courage to apply the Constitution as written. A novel concept, I'm sure. And these decisions have stopped some of the most catastrophic overreaches of the last 4 years, the last 20 years. And we have, I think, right now with the courts, probably the greatest opportunity in the last century to put government back in the box and make that box smaller. So I'd like to give everyone on the stage today an opportunity to just talk about some of the things that they were working on, some of the biggest decisions they've had, what their organizations are doing, and have a good conversation about what it's going to look like over the next 4 years as well. So I guess I'll just go ahead and start with, y'all are out of order.
Some of us are out of order.
Yes. Turns out public interest litigators don't just follow directions. Funny personality trait. So John, tell me something about who you are, who you work for, what you've been doing, and what you think in the last 4 years was one of the biggest things that you think kept government in its box.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me. Our firm was founded by Ambassador Boyden Gray, who was the top lawyer to George H.W. Bush, all 12 years of Reagan Bush. And Boyden personally was the architect of a tremendous amount of work to rein in the regulatory state, to rein in especially those powers of unelected bureaucrats to set the rules that we're all supposed to live by. Our Constitution, which Chance has so eloquently framed up for us, is one that puts the power to legislate in the hands of legislators. It cares a lot about how these people get elected, look at the timing and the kinds of offices and the geographic distribution, all of those things. Very careful system. And yet, today, the administrative state is in many ways kind of the real power, the real lawmaker. This is not how it was supposed to be. The case that we've brought that I'm proudest of is one that we're doing in partnership with TPPF, to reinforce this most basic notion of the separation of powers. The idea that the power to legislate, to actually make federal laws, lies exclusively with Congress. And I'm pleased to say that this case is now in front of the United States Supreme Court. My partner is going to be arguing it in about 4 weeks from now, which we're very excited about. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And it's going after one of the most ludicrous examples of Congress writing blank checks to a federal agency, where in this case, the Federal Communications Commission has essentially been given the power to tax, and not just on its own, but to have an industry cartel help out with setting tax rates. Just imagine that this is anything the framers possibly could have contemplated. Narrator voice, they didn't. Yeah. Absolutely not. So that's been reining in those unelected bureaucrats' powers was always the overarching vision of our founder. This is something that I've been honored, my team has been honored to personally carry on. One other theme that I'll mention is we've also done a lot to resist the intrusion of so-called ESG factors into corporate governance and investing. I know this matters a lot here in Texas because so much of the ESG movement is aimed at destroying so much of the lifeblood economically right here in Texas. One of our earliest projects was, again, a collaboration with TPPF. There's a common thread. And we've also been suing the Securities and Exchange Commission over their approval of the NASDAQ stock exchange race and sex quotas, which I'm pleased to say was recently defeated at the hands of the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals just a few weeks ago. And we're also continuing to fight on about the intrusion of ESG factors into 401k plans. That case has gotten a little wrinklier, but eventually there will be an applause line associated with it, I assure you.
How about you, Braden?
I'm Braden Boucek. I'm the Vice President of Litigation at Southeastern Legal Foundation. We're a public interest group that was actually founded in the 1970s by former Attorney General Ed Meese, so that makes us one of the older conservative public interest groups out there. We do a lot of issue work that overlaps substantially with TPPF's litigation. In fact, we've done some righteous cases with TPPF. The way I describe what it is I do to people who are non-lawyers or certainly regular lawyers who make money is that what I do is I sue the government for doing annoying things that hurt people. So business was booming over the last 4 years. It looks like it might slow down for a little bit. But to give you a sample as to what we do, we work a lot on some of the race discrimination cases, especially in the agricultural space on behalf of America's growers, ranchers, and food producers. We got pulled into that space early in 2021 when many of you probably remember President Biden tried to, on his own, forgive the loans of the farm loans of every single farmer in America, but only if you are one of the 5 specified races. And we got invested in that space and we realized that they don't call it racial discrimination. They don't even say the races until you get to the fine print. What they do is they call them socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. That's their word for it. And we dug a little deeper and we realized that this term socially disadvantaged farmer and rancher is all over United States Department of Agricultural laws and regulations. In fact, the term socially disadvantaged is all throughout the United States Code and all throughout other agencies. You could come up with hundreds and hundreds of examples of programs that are coded for socially disadvantaged, all of which means 5 races, and sometimes, but not always, women. Go explain that one to me. But a case that we're really proud of that we filed in 2024 is farmers are oftentimes affected by natural disasters, ranchers as well, and Congress routinely sets aside budgetary outlays to assist farmers and ranchers who are affected by natural disaster. Fine. So since 2021, Congress has set aside about $24 billion for United States Department of Agriculture to help out farmers and growers who suffer things like crop loss through natural disasters, rains, floods, whatever, drought, heat. Well, the United States Department of Agriculture came up with a funding formula that, you guessed it, gives you more money for the same amount of loss if you are socially disadvantaged. Now, what makes that particularly exquisitely outrageously unconstitutional is all of their claims to be doing this based on historical legacy of discrimination, which have left some races behind from a socioeconomic standpoint. But they have a separate category for farmers who are economically disadvantaged. So by definition, the only way you can use the socially disadvantaged racial category is if you are economically privileged. So as one judge put it, a Texas judge, so congratulations, said, Oprah Winfrey is admitted to this program, but others aren't. So the logic is exquisite. We've also done a lot of work. I mean, I love my farmers and ranchers. They're my favorite clients. You guys are great clients if any of you are farmers and ranchers. Is teachers, which are a little bit more demanding clients. But a lot of teachers over the last 4 years have had some of the most hideous indoctrination rammed into their schools and in their training programs. We've got several cases along this line. We've got one representing teachers in Missouri who were forced to go anti-racist training in the fall of 2020. And they were told they needed it because America is a systematically racist country founded on white supremacy and capitalism. They needed to map out their own social identities. They needed to write essays on what steps they were going to take to become an anti-racist. An anti-racist meant a term that the school district itself defined to mean advocating for changes in political, social, and economic life. So they were literally instructing their teachers to go out and become political advocates for a preferred version of politics. So, you know, and these are all cases. That case, for instance, is one that we just recently argued on Bonk before the 8th Circuit, so hoping for good things in that one. But, you know, it's been a wild 4 years, and right now my 2025 has been watching government attorneys, at least on the federal level, try to surrender. I'm optimistic that the new Secretary of Agriculture is going to probably want to do a lot fewer of these socially disadvantaged programs, but we'll see. Remains to be seen.
Ryan?
Thank you, Chance. It's such a pleasure to be with all my friends from Texas. I live in Texas. I'm with Alliance Defending Freedom, and we are a legal ministry that's devoted to freedom of speech, religious liberty, the defense of unborn life, parental rights, and marriage and family. And we've been very busy over the past 4 years. I think the beauty, and I just came to you I got in last night. I was in London for the past week and attending a conference there. And let me tell you something. We talk about lawyers trying to save America. Lawyers always like to think we're saving America, but we're not. We're simply holding the government accountable to the principles of our U.S. Constitution. And let me tell you what a gift the U.S. Constitution is to America. Having come from, absolutely. Having come from Europe, they are envious of the liberties that we have that are guaranteed by our First Amendment. You know, J.D. Vance was speaking in Munich, and he took the EU leaders to task for stepping on religious liberty, for stepping on freedom of speech. He talked about the man in London, one of ADF's clients, who was prosecuted criminally for praying in his own mind outside an abortion clinic where years before he and his girlfriend had aborted their unborn son. He was prosecuted for not speaking a word, simply standing on a sidewalk and praying silently in his own mind. That is an incredible abuse of freedom of speech. And J.D. Vance called the European leaders to task right there in Munich. And of course, afterwards, a German leader said, "This is unacceptable. We cannot have this." So that was a terrible German accent. But at any rate.
It was better than Chance's Trump imitation.
Yes. And so.
I didn't even try.
But as lawyers, that's our job, is to hold the government accountable to the Constitution. And that's what we've been doing. So we had to sue the Biden administration over and over and over again for the past 4 years. We had to sue them 5 times alone on changes to Title IX, the federal sex discrimination statute, that they reinterpreted to say it's actually a gender identity discrimination statute. We sued them 5 times. We won 5 times. We got a permanent injunction just last month covering the whole nation out of Tennessee by holding the government accountable to the First Amendment and the Due Process Clause of the Constitution. We sued the Biden administration in Florida when the Biden administration told a Christian charter school, yes, school choice in Florida, a Christian charter school, that it had to bend the knee to gender ideology or surrender its ability to participate in the National School Lunch Program. Imagine that, telling a Christian school, you can't feed, by the way, 100% of their students were eligible for free or reduced lunch. They literally said, we're going to take food out of the mouths of hungry children if you don't let boys into girls' bathrooms. That's the insanity we were dealing with for the last 4 years. But not just that, we're looking at states that are trying to step on religious liberty. Look at the state of Colorado, which tells counselors, you can counsel students, children struggling with gender identity into transitioning, quote unquote, by mutilating their bodies. But if you tell them to reconcile with their God-given biological sex, that's a crime and you can lose your license. And yet the federal court in Colorado said, nothing to see here. That's not a violation of the First Amendment. That case, we have a cert petition pending at the U.S. Supreme Court right now in that case. And we're hopeful that a case that we argued 2 terms ago, 303 Creative, that we won out of Colorado, will have something to say about that. But even more than that, we were able to hold, thank God, and again, I know this has been a really difficult time for pro-lifers, but I think we're about to turn the tide. But 2 years ago, Dobbs, after 50 years, the Supreme Court said, we're not going to honor this made-up constitutional right. We're going to get back to the text of the Constitution, and we're going to allow states like Texas to defend the lives of unborn children. And ADF had the privilege of being co-counsel with the state of Mississippi in that case. So it's things like that. When we say lawyers are trying to save America, we're not trying to save America. We're trying to hold the government accountable to this beautiful founding document that we as Americans have the incredible privilege of living under, and that's the U.S. Constitution.
So y'all may have noticed there have been some executive orders, many executive orders. And you may have noticed that a lot of these, for at least the first time that I can remember in my lifetime, are actually deregulating things or trying to get the government to do less. And as one might expect, there have been a lot of lawsuits, many lawsuits. And some of these executive orders have even been enjoined. And so I guess my question to you as people who sue the government, is there a difference between what we're seeing now from the left and their public interest litigation trying to force the government to regulate and what we do where we try to get the government off of people's backs? Is there something substantively different when it comes to the law?
So I think one part of it is that the left is trying to enforce, what they're really trying to do is conserve like the consensus of like the 60s or the 70s, where you had this aggrandized notion of government power that was in vogue, and saying that's the baseline. Like when America was refounded in the New Deal and the Great Society, that's what we're here to conserve. That's the renewal that they're trying to get back to. But for those of us, as Ryan so eloquently put it, who are trying to enforce the actual Constitution, the thing that the framers gave us, it puts you in a different place. And thankfully, we do have, especially at the federal appellate courts and especially at the United States Supreme Court, we've got critical masses of judges who actually care about what the actual text of the actual Constitution has to say. And while in the short term, I think it's going to be feasible for a lot of left-wing activists to get favorable temporary orders from their selected trial judges scattered across the country, I think as more of these cases work their way up to the Supreme Court, and we're already starting to see some of these on an emergency basis, I think that they're going to be in for a real rude awakening, and I am here for it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I'd add to it that in a way I'm almost envious at the ability that their lawyers have to be able to sneeze on a piece of paper and find a district court in Boston or Washington and come away with a nationwide injunction. I promise you this does not go the other direction.
No.
You can be in front of the best judge with the most righteous case, totally irrefutable, and you have to worry about absolutely everything in that case and have thought through how do you sue them, where do you sue them, What is your request for remedies? What is the scope of relief? I mean, you have to get this right all the way down the line, and if you don't do it, you're going to lose. It's going to cost your client something. That doesn't go the other way. Again, like some of these TROs that are getting entered, like amount to, the secretary shall not use their login credentials to see whether or not their officials are complying with an official directive or not. And so I think the principal difference is, first, as Jonathan alluded to, like the Constitution that we're asserting claims under actually exists. It isn't the unicorn fiction version of the Constitution that they wish existed. But more importantly, from a higher level, it's like we are suing over regulations and the government's ability to regulate when it bumps up against constitutional or legal limits. They are suing to force a regulation. And that doesn't make any sense to me at all. It seems to me that it's well within the executive purview to, reallocate funding priorities, fire people, all these sorts of things. This is not a constitutional issue for the most part. So.
I think it's very different, Chance. And I think, at this conference I was at recently, this has been talked about much, but after 25 years into the 21st century, the 20th century finally came to an end about 3 months ago. I mean, we're actually reaching the end. What do we mean by that? Well, we have seen management and control and power by a technocratic managerial elite wedded to an unaccountable, unelected administrative state that has effectively exercised power. And look what President Trump is doing right now. This concept of independent agencies. Agencies within the executive branch that are unaccountable and independent from the president. He's actually reeling them back in. And they're crying bloody murder. I checked this morning, 81 lawsuits and counting as of this morning against the Trump administration, and we're not even into the second month of the Trump administration. So absolutely, lawfare is real. It's not going away. We have to be on our toes. But the difference between what they're doing and what we have been doing for the past 4 years is they're trying to preserve this unaccountable, extra-constitutional, unconstitutional regime through lawfare. We're simply using law, on the other hand, to hold the government accountable to the actual text of the Constitution. And these are very different projects, and you cannot confuse the two. And so when we are walking into court now, what we're encountering from the left is efforts to abuse the text, to torture the text of the Constitution, to rely on doctrines that have been built up over the long 20th century. This century of technocratic managerial rule through the administrative state to try to preserve and hold on to power. And it's been incredible to watch the Trump administration surge into office over the past 3 weeks and try to blow that up. And I think we're going to be in for some real fireworks, quite frankly. I think the next 3 or 4 years are going to be absolutely critical to the future of the United States. As we make this decision, are we going to revert back? Many of you read Francis Fukuyama's End of History and the Last Man, where he said history is over, there's no longer going to be any major developments in the history of society because classical liberalism, technocratic managerialism is now the status quo ante forever and all times. Well, I don't think history ever ended. They just tried to push a hard pause button on it. But history is starting again, people. And this fight that we're in, this is the fight for the future. And this is the fight that we have to fight right now, because this is not about whether or not, Trump, they're going to say Trump is acting extra-constitutionally, Trump is acting against the Constitution. This is about saving our democracy. No, this is about returning to our constitutional democracy. And that's the difference.
Yeah, on that point, I found it really telling that eliminating unaccountable, unelected bureaucrats with no democratic accountability and no oversight from the only democratically elected person in the executive branch has now been labeled a threat to democracy, right? It's a strange.
Chance, I have a beautiful illustration of this. We've been calling on, my firm has been calling on Congress to get rid of this special exemption for California to mandate electric vehicles on the country as a whole. I swear I found environmentalists who oppose this say, you can't have Congress take over the EPA's power. Like, that gets in the way of public accountability, of people participating. Like, are you crazy? Like, which do you think is more democratic? Like a bunch of unelected bureaucrats at the EPA or the actually democratically elected Congress? I don't know. I could be wrong, but I'm not.
I think it's a fundamental confusion of our terms. You guys are using the word democracy, and you're confusing that with hashtag democracy. They're two very different meanings. Right?
Hashtag does a lot of work. Yeah. So one of the things that I've been pressed with, after the election came down is, oh, you sue the government and you sue the federal government. And well, Trump's been elected now, so I guess you guys can just fold up shop. There's not much left for you to do. The republic's been saved. Constitution is back into effect, and there's not a lot of work for you to do. So what are some of the things that we can do in the conservative legal movement more broadly, and some of the things that you're looking to do in the next 4 years to both lock in some of the gains we've already made, but to also, more importantly, use this opportunity to move forward and push the envelope even further to restore, an original understanding of the Constitution and restore individual liberty to people across the country?
Well, the federal government is not the only government in town. State and local governments are equally willing to transgress constitutional limits as well. Some might even say they're more eager to do so, depending on the state you live in. I'm a Tennessean, by the way. Cities are a real problem. I'm given to understand that you guys have a few cities here that are not exactly copacetic with state politics as well, so I can certainly understand. And then even at the federal level, I mean, you shouldn't assume that every decision that's made is being made by somebody who is being made at the altitude that somebody who is aligned with the president's values is going to be in on that. That's important. And then even in decisions that are, like, this is the chance to go on offense. So, that socially disadvantaged category that I referenced in the United States Department of Agriculture Code, like, it's just sitting there. It's probably not going to get used for 4 years, but let's get it out of there. So it just can't exist like a loaded gun the next time, people who actually care about colorblindness in the Constitution are out of power.
I think one special area that's going to merit some attention is, to build off of what Braden said, augmenting the efforts of the new Justice Department, the new Justice Department leadership. So I served there as a junior political appointee many moons ago, and I will tell you, it's about, best case, it's a couple hundred political appointees at most, on top of, the number is going down a little bit, but it's on top of 110, 120,000 career employees. And so actually having people who are aligned with the administration is sometimes a real challenge. So there's real opportunities for people in the public interest litigation space to be intervening, amicus briefing. We've already started doing this, like on birthright citizenship, for example, and stepping in and helping out in that way. One other theme I will mention is also, Ryan alluded to this technocratic managerial class. The same class of people in the administrative state, they're rotating into and out of corporate America, they're in and out of the foundations, the media, academia, and in the right places, like going after bad actors in the private sector absolutely serves the public interest. We've sued CVS over religious discrimination. We've sued Target for securities fraud over their insane LGBT pride campaign. You may remember that cost $20 billion in shareholder value to hold this woke nonsense accountable. That's going to continue.
I just want to echo exactly what Braden and John said. When you squeeze the toothpaste of liberalism, the toothpaste just goes to a different place in society. And so we're squeezing it, and where they're going back into the corporate space. Gavin Newsom quickly declared after the election that California was going to lead the resistance, right? And so we actually got the chance to go sue Gavin Newsom on behalf of the Babylon Bee, which was fantastic. He passed a statute that basically made satire effectively illegal in California, and so, which was kind of satirical, right? So we sued him on behalf of, and then we added Rumble just for fun. So Rumble and Babylon Bee versus Gavin Newsom challenging this statute in California, but not just that, we sued Asana, which is one of the big workflow software platforms in California, because they kicked a ministry off of their nonprofit pricing program, because they said, well, actually, our nonprofit pricing program is only for non-religious nonprofits. I'm like, well, how many of those are there out there? So at any rate, so we're suing them under the Unruh Act. What's good for the goose is good for the gander in California. And so we're also going to be at the U.S. Supreme Court in 2 months' time on a school choice case, a very important case. We actually brought a lawsuit on behalf of St. Isidore Seville Catholic School. It's a virtual charter school in Oklahoma that was chartered by the state charter school board, and they were quickly challenged in court by the Republican Attorney General, who said, well, you can't be a part of the charter school program because you're religious. You can't be part of it. And so the court found that they were state actors. It said the Establishment Clause of the Constitution prevents this Christian charter school from being part of the charter school program in Oklahoma. And so we're going to argue that case at the U.S. Supreme Court in just 2 months' time. But not only that, we're also going to be battling it out over whether or not states can exclude abortion providers from their state Medicaid programs. This is coming out of the Carolinas. This is the Medina case. We're arguing that next month. We're actually arguing that against Planned Parenthood, which is fantastic. And so there's a lot of work to be done still at the state level. Like I said, when you squeeze the toothpaste of liberalism, you just got to chase that toothpaste around the tube and figure out where they went and then go sue them there.
I always like to say that we are equal opportunity government suers, just across the board. So I guess I'll give you guys a chance. This is always a fun question. I ask it when we actually interview people to come work at TVPF, but it's a fun question. I won't ask you even versus odd amendments if you had to get rid of one. That one's hard. But I will ask you, because I think it's possible for the first time, at least in my lifetime, if you could wave a magic wand and overturn one Supreme Court case tomorrow, what would it be and why? Just one, not a baker's dozen.
We don't have to go in order, guys.
We're sitting out of order, so that works.
That's true. I would expect you to say Humphrey's executor, John.
Oh, that's such a cliche.
I mean, I would...
You have to say what it is, though. This is not a Federalist Society event. Like, nobody... The 8 lawyers out there going, yeah, Humphrey's executor. Someone's got to actually say what that is.
Well, yeah, so, all right. Ryan baited me. So, let's go with Humphrey's executor. So Mr. Humphrey had been a federal trade commissioner in the 30s who was fired by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in fact, because Roosevelt wanted his own guy on there. He sued, and the Supreme Court said, in essence, that it was okay to limit the power of the president, limit the chief executive in his executive power, who's got the responsibility to take care the laws be faithfully executed. It was okay for Congress to limit that. This has the effect of blessing the huge swath of the deep state, of insulating the deep state ultimately from democratic accountability to the person that the people have actually elected through the electors. So fortunately, I think Humphreys may not be long for this world. Under President Trump, the Department of Justice has indicated that they're changing positions on this. And for the first time ever, you've had the president get very vigorous, very aggressive about removing people who are not a fit with the new administration.
I would, at ADF, we've been targeting several different cases. Obviously, Roe was a big one, and getting that one knocked out was incredibly huge. I would say Smith. And this is the case that more or less instigated the passage of what are called Religious Freedom Restoration Acts all across the country, especially at the federal level. But what it does was it basically gutted the Free Exercise Clause at the federal level by saying that neutral laws of general applicability don't offend the Free Exercise Clause, even if they burden religious freedom. And that's very problematic because religious freedom is frequently burdened by, think about the vaccine cases during COVID. We had all of these neutral laws that shut down facilities across the country, including churches. Talk about a burden on free exercise of religion, shutting down a church entirely and saying you can't hold a religious service because you're afraid that we can't maintain spacing in the church. huge burden on religious freedom, and yet these were ostensibly neutral laws of general. Now, we found ways around that by arguing they were making exceptions for things like casinos in Las Vegas. We said, well, that's an essential facility. We have to have gambling, but we can't have churches meeting. But I think Smith's been in a lot of damage, and what it's also done is it's warped and distorted the nature of our law by forcing a lot of otherwise good free exercise litigation into free speech litigation. So I think that, and now again, I think Smith has been pared back substantially over time, but I think it's still a pernicious doctrine in many ways. I mean, the other one, well, we could all argue about Bostock. I mean, that one, but I'll offer Bostock up.
You want me to take that one? No.
There you go. Okay. I would also say Bostock, though. I mean, Bostock was an absolutely horrific interpretation of Title VII, basically saying that Title VII, not only that sex discrimination under Title VII includes gender identity discrimination, is causing all sorts of mischief across the law. It was pointed to by the Biden administration as a reason for abusing the language in Title IX. So I had two, but there you go. Bostock and Smith.
Those are good ones. I'll be that guy since I know you guys wouldn't be. I'll say Williamson v. Lee Optical, which is a 1950s law that I think it actually was out of
It's a deep
Oklahoma.
cut, Braden.
Yeah, thanks. I just throw something out there. I'm the knuckleballer of the crowd. But it had to do with, I think, an Oklahoma law that required ophthalmologists to be able to be the ones that could manufacture lenses for eyeglasses, like the things you get at lens classes or whatever. And that case was challenged under the grounds this was irrational, unconstitutional, and violated, the guy's right to earn a living because, you don't need to go to medical school to figure out how to fit a lens into a glasses frame. By the way, and I don't know if you have these laws in Texas. We still have this law in Tennessee. And if you go to Lens Crafters in Nashville, there's a single building with a wall in the middle of it where there's somebody who does your eye exams here, and you have to walk outside and walk inside to the other side of it to actually get your lenses fitted. So these laws still exist in places, including, unfortunately, Tennessee. But the Supreme Court said that this law was essentially unreviewable because it didn't implicate one of the enumerated rights that are set forth in the Bill of Rights of the Constitution, and whether it was rational or not is not something that's subject to empirical courtroom fact-finding, which essentially makes it impossible to challenge governmental actions unless it implicates one of the core rights that are specified in the Constitution. And the bigger reason why I think that's important is we all learned during COVID, there's a lot of things the government can do to you that don't necessarily affect your freedom of religion. They affect your right to earn a living. And I think Americans have an inherent constitutional right to come to the court and show that governmental action is arbitrary, unfair, irrational. And when the government says, just trust us, you should have every right to subject that to courtroom fact-finding. I mean, after all, this country was founded by pilgrims. They were fleeing religious persecution, but those aren't the only people who came here. That was actually only half the people on the Mayflower. The other half of the people were just coming to make a better life for themselves. So I think economic opportunity is one of the foundational principles of the country, and nowhere is that more true than in Texas.
How are we doing on time, Roy? Okay, so we only got 2 minutes, so I'm going to do one more lightning round, one more quick question. Least favorite Supreme Court justice of all time, go.
Oh, I got to go first. Oliver Wendell Holmes.
Oh, you took
I just didn't want anybody to steal my answer.
Great mustache, bad justice.
Yeah, very quotable justice. I think that's part of the reason why he's still around. But the more I learn about this individual, the more I hate him. He gets more loathsome the more knowledge you acquire about his life. Oliver Wendell Holmes actually wrote a very famous dissent that, in reference to the right to earn a living, said, the Constitution didn't enact Mr. Herbert's social statics, meaning that you can't bring these kind of claims to court, and that's still a pithy phrase that, in my opinion, actually makes no sense if you think about it, but it's batted around with great frequency, even in majority opinions by conservative Supreme Court justices now. But he also wrote Buck v. Bell, which is the one that said you can forcibly sterilize women against their will in the name of preserving the intellectual hereditary traits of the race writ large. And that is still an opinion, by the way, that has never been overruled.
Yeah.
Right.
So It's hard to disagree with any of that. But,
Well, you get me talking about Oliver Wendell Holmes, and boy, I get all worked up. Right.
I'd have to cast my vote for William Brennan. The sort of the shadowy puppet master behind Roe v. Wade, which, thanks be to God, has been relegated to the dustbin of history, but also of many, many, many other things at some of the low points of the court's history. One I'll flag is the rewrite of Title VII, our employment anti-discrimination law, to allow essentially race-based affirmative action. Obscure case called Steelworkers v. Weber that continues to have pernicious consequences to this day. So I'd say Brennan. I think Eisenhower appointed him would agree with me.
Do you have one?
You're taking mine. So I would read, this may be overly obvious, but Tawney from the 19th century, but not so much because he wrote the Dred Scott opinion, but mainly, and that was horrible enough, but he was an arrogant man.
He wrote the Charles River Bridge case, which is a good case. Right?
But a very arrogant.
Isn't this the most delightfully nerdy panel you have gotten the whole time you've been here? This is what you're here for at a policy summit.
We got another 30 minutes if you guys want to meet us in the hall.
Welcome to the faculty lounge at a law school. But just because I think it was an exhibition of judicial arrogance. And the last thing we need on the bench are arrogant people, because arrogance is anathema to a humble, appropriate interpretation and application of a document that necessarily limits the power of government. And I think that we need to look for the character of humility and an understanding of boundaries in our justices, and I think he exhibits all the things that are opposite that. So that's why I would pick him.
Well, we are out of time. I'd like to thank the panel. I'd like to thank all of you for supporting the foundation, and I am so blessed to be able to be in the battle for individual liberty with these gentlemen. They are brilliant. Thank you all so much. Thank you for your time.
Let's give it up for our panel. The best bunch of delightful nerds I've ever met in my life. Thank each and every one of y'all for attending this year, our Texas Policy Summit. Next year, we'll be back in April. Hopefully it'll be a little warmer outside. But I hope you leave today and you leave this summit encouraged and inspired and understanding there's still a lot of work to do, but also understand we are winning. And if we keep at it, we will achieve a lot, and we'll achieve a lot together. And very soon, Dr. Jim, we're going to pass school choice in Texas. God bless y'all, and God bless Texas.